On this episode of Coding 101, we're wrapping up Santa's Little Helper.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by FreshBooks, the simple cloud accounting solution that helps millions of entrepreneurs and small business owners save time billing and get paid faster. Join over 5 million users running their businesses with ease. Try it free at freshbooks.com/C101. Welcome to Coding 101. It's the Twitch show where we let you into the wonderful world of the Code Monkey. I'm Father Robert Palliser, the digital Jesuit, and I'm joined by my personal favorite code warrior, Mr. Lou Maresca. Lou, thank you very much for coming back on to Coding 101.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Now, Lou, when we last left our intrepid audience, we had just finished up the final rough cut code for Santa's Little Helper. The whole idea was to give people an application that could go out into the internet, look for particular items or particular products that we want to compare through the holiday season, and then grab prices from different websites. Fantastic program, but there was one thing that was missing. It was the interface. We've kind of fixed that, yeah?
Correct. Yeah, we want to make it more usable for allow user to basically continue to maintain their database worth of items, be able to choose through them, be able to search through all the different minimum prices for each item that you've seen over time. So we've kind of added some of that logic, and we've created a UI that makes it a little easier.
Fantastic. Now we're going to get right into that, but before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of programming. There's one story in particular that has me very excited. Now, if you have been keeping watch, you've known that Microsoft has been donating more and more of their code into the open source project. The idea is to let other programmers have a go at some of the core technologies that Microsoft's been holding on to. Now, the last one we heard of was .NET. That was absolutely fantastic. Actually, that happened at the start of this last module I had with Lou. They gave some of the most important parts of the .NET framework into this open source foundation, which means if you're programming for .NET, you can now take that same code and push it to Android, push it to Mac OS X, push it to iOS. That was kind of momentous. I mean, that was a surprise, wasn't it, Lou?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a surprise, but it was one of those things that you never thought was going to happen because they was so big and monolithic that it was hard for them to do open source. But I think it's a huge step forward.
Yeah, and I think it's a sign of the changing times behind Microsoft. They've realized that, you know what, you can't just make a lot of software and expect people to buy it over and over. You have to build up community. It's all about community. It's all about environment. It's always about building up the goodwill between the developers and the monolithic company that's hosting it. So, to that end, Microsoft has gone a little bit further by pushing Project Orleans to the open source foundation, to this effort to open source it. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who go, well, what's Project Orleans? One word, Halo. Lou, what is Project Orleans?
So it's a cloud services platform, really, to allow you to build really high-scale computing applications with really not needing to understand or learn about complex concurrency patterns and scaling patterns and distribution and distributed computing and caching and all that stuff. It's a platform to allow you to build an app that it's single-threaded but asynchronous and allows you to basically scale to amount of users that you have without really having to understand what's going on.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Now, one of the things that's just amazing about this is this this automatic instantiation. So when we were talking about classes in the last module, we talked about how you could create a class, but it didn't automatically become an object. You had to instantiate it. In other words, you had to tell it, okay, I'm declaring it, I'm giving it these parameters. Here we go. In Project Orleans, when we make a similar item, it actually becomes real. So, and they call it an actor. And these actors are persistent. So once you create this actor, it's always there. It's always going to be working, which means that scalability is through the roof. You could start with 1 or 2 actors and you can just keep building and building and building. Now, For the layperson at home, Lou, what does that do for scalability in the cloud, this idea of persistence?
So, I mean, let's talk about it from the concept of Halo. So, like, with Halo, you have users that are multiplayer users that are in the game, and they want to keep track of information about what they're doing, and you consistently can add more users. You can scale up to millions of users, and so that's really the concept. Like, for instance, they have what they call static services, which means that they'll keep track of all the shots fired in the game and which weapons they're using, all the achievements and personal information of that user, and that's all scalable. It could be static for each player, for each user, for each actor. And then that could also scale up to millions and millions of users, and being able to do that all concurrently and asynchronously in the background. And so that's really kind of the key aspect of the service and what Orleans can do.
Right. And those actors can actually communicate with one another. So it's not as if you just have a bunch of processes that are running in the background. You can have them interact. I mean, that's the whole idea behind using it for the Halo engine. If you have to have that in the framework so that you can have different bits of AI or scripting interacting with one another. Now imagine if you were to apply that to an application along with some deep neural networking, which is what Microsoft Research has been doing for Skype. And you can have actors that are actually modifying themselves and other actors to get essentially a learning cloud system that's infinitely scalable. I mean, it's very exciting. It's kind of high level right now. I don't think there's a really good way for the beginner to jump in. But Lou, if people wanted to find out more about Orleans, what should they do?
So, I mean, it's also on Microsoft Research. If you go to Microsoft.com and just search for Project Orleans, it'll show up. Also, there's on Coplex, which is Microsoft's kind of open source library of data. It's really easy. Just do a Bing search of Project New Orleans or Project Orleans. And it'll show up, and they'll actually point you to where the code's at and how to get started. They have a ton of examples on Coplex, and they'll give you a startup package and what to do, and they'll give you examples of how to do it. So try it out, check it out.
Yeah, and everything will be available by the start of 2015. They're going to be releasing it under an MIT license. The code should end up on GitHub. So even if you have no idea what we've been talking about right now, at least download the code examples and take a look, because that sort of scalable cloud computing where you've got persistent objects, I think it's a pretty good bet that's going to be programming in the future. Now, Lou, shall we jump back into Santa's Little Helper?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, but before we do that, I want to ask you a question, Lou. Did you spend any time before you went over to Redmond doing any sort of independent consulting?
Of course, yeah. All through college and everything.
It's a rite of passage for programmers and geeks, and you always end up starting your own business, and then maybe you go someplace else. Now, let me ask you this, because I know the answer for me. When you were doing independent consulting, did you find it a pain in the butt to just get money? After you've done a job,
yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, doing the job is fun. Dealing with the people was fun, but that whole idea of accounting, it was never my thing. In fact, there were a couple of instances I had where my invoices went out too late and they look unprofessional, and I just didn't get paid for the jobs that I had already done. This is not unique. You're going to have people running small businesses all around the world who are going to have this issue of not having the time, the resources, or the experience to run a proper accounting office in their small business, which is why we're happy to welcome to Coding 101, FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the easiest way for a small business to send out invoices, to keep tabs on where payments should be coming in. In fact, FreshBooks is basically an accounting office in the cloud. Are you still using Word or Excel or Google Docs to create invoices? Those just don't look right. FreshBooks is the easiest way to create professional-looking invoices in minutes. It lets you avoid those awkward emails and phone calls to your late-paying clients, or even worse, to have to contact a client and say, did you pay me? I think you did pay me, but I'm not sure. FreshBooks, you'll never have that question, because they'll tell you right up front in the interface what invoices are going out, what invoices are outstanding. Now, you can set up recurring profiles so you can put your billing on autopilot, and FreshBooks customers spend less time on paperwork, which means you free up time up to 2 days per month to focus on the work that you actually love. Now, do you keep your receipts stuffed in your wallet to keep track of expenses? Well, FreshBooks can help you with that too. You can snap photos of receipts right from your phone and instantly capture your expenses. No more do you get back from a trip and figure out, well, this is my taxi cab retreat, and this is for that dinner I went to, and this was personal expense, this was business expense. Do it that night, and with FreshBooks, you'll always be up to date. You can record billable hours and track your time with multiple rates. And FreshBooks integrates with your apps, Google Apps, PayPal, Stripe, MailChimp, Fundbox, Zen Payroll. They've got an open API so developers can integrate with the FreshBooks platform, making it easy for you to get the data in the format that you want. If you ever need help, you'll talk to a real person every time. FreshBooks award-winning support is ready to help, and support is free forever. I mean, this is your money, folks. This is your business. You shouldn't feel as if, I'm not sure if I want to call someone for help. Maybe I can solve it myself. No, get it fixed now with FreshBooks. Now, Amber MacArthur of BNN's App Central says FreshBooks Mobile allows me to quickly send invoices and check in on my business no matter where I am. She trusts it. You should too. We want you to try FreshBooks free for 30 days with no obligation. Go to freshbooks.com/C101 and enter coding 101 in the How Did You Hear About Us section when signing up. Start your 30-day free trial today by going to freshbooks.com/C101. And don't forget to enter coding 101 in the How Did You Hear About Us section to throw us some love. We thank FreshBooks for their support of coding 101. Lou, let's get into it. We've decided to make Santa's Little Helper pretty. How did we do that?
Well, prettier.
Prettier, that's right. I'm sorry, no, it was pretty before. And now we're getting pretty in a geek way.
Or the other way around, where I'm not really good at making things pretty, so it's as pretty as I can make it.
Okay, I'll go with that. Let's do it.
All right. So, one thing that we wanted to be able to do is consistently be able to list the items. Let's just quickly demo the app really fast. So pop this guy up here and we'll zoom in. So really, really simple app, but functional. So what we want to show here is, one thing that we notice is we get a list of our items, we get the price, the minimum price, and then I can actually kind of scroll through these items. These are all the things that I'm kind of tracking now, and it's always showing me the minimum price.
Did the images come from the JSON blob?
The images came from the JSON blob.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So what the kind of cool thing about it is it actually didn't come from the JSON blob itself. The links for the images came from the JSON blob, and then you actually have to make another call, like an HTTP call, and say, "Hey, give me the images," and I'll display them for you.
But that's just standard HTTP. That's nothing.
Right. So that's kind of the key here. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to build this out and make it look really nice. So one thing I wanted to show you is this is the main form right here, and you notice it doesn't have too much to it. All it really is just a square. And has a list item control in the middle of it. And so the key here is I wanted to be able to display each item by itself in a specific format. So what I did was I went here and I said I wanted to add a new control. So I hit add and I clicked on new user control. And it created me this what we call a product search. I created what we call a product search result control. And so what this is a control that I broke it up into different pieces. I have an image location over here and its title and price. And then again, we use data binding. So in this case, I binded it to the title and the price. And then you can make it look however you want it to look. Like I could put more information in here. I could put when it was created. Like if I wanted to, put another label here and say, maybe when it was actually created or whatever, I could put that in here. And then every time this actually showed the list item, it would basically look like that. So when I would run this, the list item would look however I broke it up in one look.
Lou, we've actually had people who got freaked out by this. They were saying, well, we don't understand this whole data binding idea. Over the weekend, someone actually explained it to me in a way that I could explain it to others. They said, if you've ever made a mail merge, if you've ever done a mail merge between Excel and Word, let's say you're doing holiday cards and you want to print out envelopes or stickers, that's essentially what we're doing with binding. We're saying, look, we've got these fields that have been indexed. We remember we took the big old JSON blob, we turned it into something that was readable, and then we indexed individual pieces of information. And then we made a mail merge template. We said this field will go here, this field will go there, and that field will go over on this side. Now, it is a bit more complicated when we do it in programming because it is bidirectional, but if you think of it like a mail merge template, then you're not going to freak out when you start to see this code. All Lou is doing is saying, this is how I want the fields laid out, and then it's going to interact with my back end.
So when you're building a UI, you start with the layout, and then you kind of worry how you're going to bind it to the data later on. Normally, I just start with the layout. And again, I'm not normally the best designer in the world. So I ask people, what would you like to see, and how you want it to look? What's the information you want to see? And then I just build my little control, my list item control, and how I want it to view in that list, in that huge list of items. And then I put that on, I create the XAML for it, and then I worry about binding it later after the fact.
Right.
That's kind of the easiest way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, because the binding is, once you get used to it, it's not that hard. It really isn't. And like Lou said, neither of us are designers. I can't make a UI look pretty to save my life. But what we can do is we can give you the basic tools. And if you are a designer, and once you see how Lou has been binding these elements to the back end, you can make it look pretty, and the functionality will be maintained. That's one of the beauties of this approach. All right, continue. So we've got the elements on the screen, and they're starting to look the way that you want them to look. They've been bound to the back end. Where do we go from here?
So the first thing is, a lot of things people say, hey, well, I'm not a designer, I really don't know how to code. So one of the things the thing about XAML is you can use a tool called Blend. And what it does is it's supposed to, just like it says, supposed to say what it's doing, it's supposed to blend the ability of designing an application without really having to write the code. And it'll actually generate that code for you. And so what they normally do first is what you want to do is you set the data context. And so what this means is it's like, I write out a letter of data, I write out a bunch of information on a piece of paper, and then I'm handing it to you, and you're displaying it on the big screen to everybody in the room. And so that's really what data context is. I'm saying for this entire window, whatever inside, whether it's a list item or a list box or a text box or whatever, I'm going to give it a bunch of data, and the data is going to come from this one thing, and this one thing being my view model that I've created, the item search view model. And so if I go look at item search view model, this is something I created before, and it has in this case, the public thing that I have on here is a collection of, it's a list or an observable collection of products. And that's really all I really care about, because if you go inside a retail product, it has things like, again, the price and the item title and all that information on there. So that's what I want to bind to, because that's what I want to display. And so now that I have my data context, it's saying, okay, now I know where the data I need to get it from. Now how am I supposed to display it? And so that's when you go back into your control. And now it's really easy. Now in the control yourself, when you want to actually, let's say for this specific label content, let's see for the title, this control right here, the content of it, I'm just going to say bind to the title. And that title, again, let me go back to my object. It's from this retail products. And if I go inside here, I want to bind to title. And that's it. So I've gave it a data context, and I say I want to bind to the title of this object. And now when I go and run the code, if that title has data in it like a string, then it will display it. As easy as that.
Nice, nice. Now this again, just as a refresher, because there's going to be people who won't remember the module when we did this, but this is our MVVM again, right? Because we built out the back end, we built out the view model. Now we're building the view here and the model. If I remember correctly, this is actually a pattern called the presentation model, right? I mean,
that's right.
That's where this comes from.
The infamous legend in the object-oriented development world, Martin Fowler came up with a thing called the presentation model. And again, the gentleman who actually created the MVVM pattern actually generated it off of the PM model. And it's almost identical. And the key here is it's not, a lot of people say, oh, it was developed by Microsoft, it's a Microsoft pattern. But if you notice, a lot of the things around the web, like Knockout.js and Kendo and all these other frameworks are trying to bring this pattern to something like a web application, or even native applications in Java and Android are doing this too. And the reason why is because it's allowing you to separate your code from your concerns, from your view. So your view from your concerns, and that's really the kind of the key. And it's newer. MVC is a little older. It's an old ASP.NET thing, and this is a lot newer, and it actually works a lot better with today's technology, I guess you could say.
Right. It's a little bit of an update for the newer languages. So Lou, are we done now? I mean, is this fully functional? Is this where we want to leave it? We've got it bound. We've got the items where we want them. It does. We know from the last episode that it actually will go out into the world. It will look at those web pages. It will hit those APIs. It will pull in the products that we're looking for. What else do we need to make this functional, complete?
So I think one of the things that you want to do is make sure that your for me, what I was doing originally was I was just displaying all the items on the screen that I got, and that was it. So what you want to do is you want to add a bunch of logic to it that makes sense to you. So for instance, in my case, I didn't care, like in this case, I might have an entry in this underlying database that's behind this application that has a line entry for every time I pasted a URL in there. So I could go to like Newegg, let's say, and paste a URL to a TV, and then it'll go get the price and it'll insert it in the database. And so every time I loaded the app up, I'd see like 50 different lines of Newegg and all the different prices. But the key here is, why is that useful for me, I guess? So for me, what I wanted to do is I wanted to display what the minimum price it ever was and what the price it is right now. And that's useful, right? Because I can say, oh, well, at some time it was a lot cheaper. Why would I buy it now? That kind of thing, right? So that's kind of the key. And so now you have to kind of think about how you're going to manipulate your data or the data that you have and how you're going to return it back in a better way so that's more useful to your application.
Right.
And so, go ahead.
And again, this is where a designer, a UI guy or woman really comes in handy, because most of us can do everything we need to make sure that the data is there, that the data is tabulating properly. But you need the UI person who's going to say, okay, now that we've got all that, let's change the view so that it actually presents useful information just instead of everything. Because right now, I mean, Brian, if you go back to his screen, if you look at his interface, so it's properly pulling the item off of Newegg, it's getting the thumbnails properly, it's giving us the title, it's giving the price, it's giving us a link so that if we are interested, we can jump over. But a UI person may look at this and say, you know what, we need more interactive functions for price. We want to be able to say, okay, show me lowest price, show me vendor with lowest price, or show me a product similar to this. This is all functionality that you can bake in with the existing information. You just have to move things around in the view itself.
That's right. And another thing too is you might have to manipulate the data. So as a developer, you have to manipulate the data a little bit more. So what I did in the back end, and again, this will be part of the code that you'll get, is I actually added a special method called retrieve minimum prices, and it'll generate a query that will go and get the minimum price for each item and return that. So now I'm building up a retail product and returning that from the database, and then what's displayed to you again is just the minimum version of that product, minimum price of that product. So this way, again, like you said, you could display it a lot differently, and I can even get the historical data and display it as a nice, pretty like line graph or
Right.
bar chart or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, because that's the thing. You have that data. It's there. It's just not being displayed right now because you didn't call for it. If you felt as the designer, as the UI person, that that's the data that the user wants, or maybe there's another screen that will show that data, it's easy for you to pull that forward, and it's not that hard to program because all the really hard programming has already been done. Again, all you're doing is you're setting up that mail merge. You're saying, I need this field and this field, or maybe I need these two fields in relation to a third. That's the beauty of this MVVM model. I think the nice thing, Lou, is this program, I think probably showed off MVVM better than anything we did during the last C# module.
I think so. I think, one of the things that I kind of pride myself in is this is what we call the code behind of the file, and there's nothing in it. And that's when you know you used MVVM correctly.
That's the way it's supposed to look. When it looks like that, it means you're doing your job right.
That's right. That's right. So I think the key here is one of the learning experiences I have is there's a lot of parts to even this very simple utility, and so being able to kind of separate them and then test them separately is really the kind of the key to MVVM. Is I have a piece of code that just calls the database and gets the products out of the database, and then I have some tests around there, and then that's kind of my model, and then my view model is being able to get that data and binding it or putting it on like my objects called my retail product object, and then then taking that and displaying it to the user, and that's where the view kind of jumps in. So it's really separating those concerns made it a lot easier to build it's actually a very complex app now that we've done all these different providers and everything.
Right. And remember, this was all built up from the first episode, which was just calling APIs. So from calling APIs to formatting it into useful information, to manipulating that information, to presenting the manipulated information to the user. And I think that's a really, really good summary for how you make a useful app.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you were going to improve this, I know that you've already stated a few things that you'd like to change, like the historical, so on and so forth. But what are the things that people should look for as they're perusing the code? Because all this code will be available to every user who's watching the show right now. What are the things they should look for, and what are the things that you would suggest they tweak, they play with on their own time?
So right now, like a lot of the code is a little bit static, and it will go and say, okay, go give me this item, and then parse this URL, and then get the item ID off of it. I mean, what it could be done is it can be a lot more dynamic, so you can continue to add providers very easily. Like I have all these different products like Sam's Club and Walmart and so on, but you can add some more in there very easily, and making that dynamic for the UI too, because right now the UI is kind of bound to these different providers. And so the way you can do that is you can use data binding even in farther than I've already done, and you can start adding new providers, and then just by default, when you put a URL in there, the items would just magically show up from whatever provider that you wanted, whatever new store that you, JCPenney's or whatever you wanted to add in there, right? So I think that would be kind of the key. So look inside the providers and look inside the data binding code and find a way to make it more dynamic, make it more useful to you, as well as check out some of the controls, like the chart controls. I think that would be kind of neat. I think that would be the most useful for me as a data presentation, right? Is just being able to take all the data, all these listings that I have every day that I'm getting from like all these different providers, and displaying it in a much more useful manner, and then that would make the app even more so, even better.
Fantastic. Lou Maresca, senior programmer for Microsoft. Sir, it is always an honor. It is so much fun to have you on the show, and we're going to have you back again and again and again, because I got to tell you, I learn every time you come on as a Code Warrior.
Appreciate you having me. I have a great time, and in fact, I learned a ton coming on this program.
Well, you say that. It's funny though, because sometimes as you're repeating it, you're going, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, I learned that before." This is a shorter, abridged version of Coding 101, because this is actually our last live show for 2014. We will be pre-recording this Friday for the new year, but next up is the best of, and then Coding 101 actually falls on Christmas and on New Year's, and we're not Grinchy enough to have shows on Christmas and New Year's. But we will definitely have you back, sir, when we've got another project cooked up for you. Could you please tell the folks at home where they can find you, where they can find your work, and where they can find you elsewhere on the interwebs?
You bet. Twitter, always LouMM. And of course, my work that I do here at Microsoft is all found at crm.dynamics.com. And look out soon. You can check me out at lewism.com. That's going to be up and running soon for some of my other projects that I'm running into.
Yeah. Again, we'll have you back on, sir. I hope I see you in person soon, because there's a lot to talk about. We got some exciting stuff, and I want you to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me again.
Ladies and
Happy
gentlemen,
New Year.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Lou Maresca, we bid you farewell, Code Warrior. Now, folks, I know that this has been a lot of information, but here's the fun thing. We're actually going to give you all the code. You will have the exact assets that Lou designed for this module. It will be available on the Coding 101 show notes page. We had an issue last week. The upload didn't go correct, but this one will be there, and we hope that you'll take it and that you'll tweak it. It will work as is, but add those features that Lou talked about. Play with some of the controls. See what kind of joy you can get out of modifying his code to make it look a little bit better or work a little bit better for you. That's all part of the joy of being a Code Monkey. Also, please stop by our show note page at twit.tv/code in order to automatically subscribe. It's not just a place for show notes. It's a place where you can get every single episode automatically into the device of choice. If you want it in your iPod, or say in your Android tablet, your laptop, your PC, your streaming device, you could do that. It's part of the love. It's part of, the Twit Army. Don't forget that we also do this show live every week when we're not pre-recorded for the holidays on Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. You'll be able to find us at live.twit.tv. And as long as you're watching us live, why not jump into the chat room at irc.twit.tv? On most episodes, I've got you right down there so I can see what you're talking about. If you have questions, we can normally answer them right on the show. Don't forget, you can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ. If you follow me, you'll find out what's coming up on future episodes of the show. You'll be able to suggest future topics for all of my shows, be it for This Week in Enterprise Tech on Mondays, or Padre's Corner on Tuesdays, or Know-How and Coding 101 on Thursdays, or if you just want to see what my dog does when he gets scared by the kids yelling because they just received all their gifts early, or if you want to see what I'm doing when I'm broadcasting radio to KFI down in Los Angeles from the basement. It's all part of the experience that is the Twit TV Brick House. Until next time, and until next year, I'm Father Robert Balazer, and my TD is Mr. Brian Burnett, who I'm surprising right now. Brian, can you say hello to the good boys and girls at home?
I did not have a camera ready for that.
That's right. I didn't want you to have one. But where can they find you, sir?
On Thursdays at 11 o'clock Pacific time, we're doing Know How. So definitely check that out. I do have my camera on here.
See, there's lights. These things we call lights.
We've been doing a lot of quadcopter stuff. So check that out. I fixed my quadcopter, so I'm super excited about that right now. Had to put a new motor in it, but if you want to learn probably the best gift that you could get someone for Christmas, watch Know How.
That's Super Jelly.
Yeah, Super Jedi.
Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balazer. End of line.